Collins Okoth, the Pitbull from Kasabun. On the football pitch, he was, and remains clearly miles ahead of the pack in terms of both technical and physical ability. Covering every blade of grass on the pitch like one seasoned sports journalist, once described his performance for the Kenyan national soccer team Harambee Stars against Uganda Cranes at the Nyayo National Stadium. Thanks for tuning into Kenyan Register. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work. Yet, amongst some quarters, he is perceived as undisciplined and a boy who never maximized his footballing talent. Never mind, he won 4 domestic league titles with both Gor Mahia FC and Tusker FC. Was Collins Okoth a victim of Kenya's lack of progressive football structures, bad agents, or was he a victim of his own talent and environment? And why am I using the past tense as if he retired from professional football? I met him recently in Nairobi, and we sat down as he cleared the air and took me down memory lane of his career. A brief history. Okoth was born in 1989 at Nairobi's Pumwani Hospital. The third-born child from a family of 5, he grew up in Kasabun area of Ruaraka, Nairobi. Life in the informal settlement was not easy, and football was a timely outlet to the boy away from crime and drugs. Attended Chandoria Primary School and later Silverbridge High School, all in Nairobi. Football was his solace, and often he was kicking a ball at the famous Baba Dogo soccer grounds. A football pitch where several of Kenya's amazing soccer talents like Victor Wanyama, McDonald Mariga, Patrick Aboya amongst others honed their skills. He started by featuring for the Baba Dogo Babes, an under-12 age group side. His outstanding talent got recognition from Matha Youth Sports Association, MYSA, and in 2000 was selected to travel to Norway. However, at the time he was in Class 7 and his teachers denied him the chance for being young. Fate would knock on his door again in 2002 under MYSA's coach, Robert Maina, as he made the under-13 squad that travelled to Norway and eventually won their age group cup. While in Norway, he had a family that he was attached to like the rest of the boys from MYSA who travelled with him. They would come to help him settle school fees back at home that enabled him finish his schooling. However, it was not easy, as fee delays from the tough economic times at home would mean that he missed school often. It is later that he would join the Tusker FC youth side after he had impressed their then coach, Rishadi Shidu, in a friendly that was organised against his then side, Baba Dogo Youth. In 2006, aged 17, Okoth was signed by KCB but spent only 6 months with the Bankers. Coach Jacob Muley, who was then at Tusker FC, would sign him up the following year in 2007. Sadly, the political situation in Kenya, the post-elections violence of 2007, ensured play was limited. He would fly to Norway in 2008 and was hosted by a white family. While still contracted at Tusker FC, Kenyan international Arnold Origi would invite him to FC Moss for trials. The club had met its 5 foreign player quota when he arrived. His was to stay around and see if they released 1 player so he could be slotted in. He did not, as where the club was located and his host city were hundreds of kilometers apart, and this denied him a chance to travel regularly for training. In 2010, coach Sadikia Otieno roped him in at Gor Mahia FC, earning a salary of 25,000 shillings then. He established himself as a regular and darling of the Green Army. His midfield partnership with Anthony Akumu, Jeffrey Baba Kizito, and Khalid Ocho over the years he spent at the club saw the club win several league titles at ease with dominant performances. He later moved to Sofapaka FC, where he only stayed for 3 months, as this was the time the club and its president Eli Kalekwa were experiencing financial difficulties. The club was unable to pay him the agreed 40,000 shillings salary. He returned to Tusker FC, where he was on a guaranteed 35,000 shillings salary. Domestically, Okoth won 3 league titles at Gor Mahia, and another one at Tusker FC. He also won the GoTV Shield at Gor Mahia FC and the top 8 trophies for both Tusker FC and Gor Mahia. National team call-ups and performances. In 2007, he was called up to the national team by then-coach, Jacob Muley. Despite making the bench, it was an invaluable time and lesson for the young man who would later establish himself as a regular and fan favorite. Whereas he remains synonymous with being a defensive midfielder amongst soccer fans. Okoth was actually a terrific attacking midfielder who filled the number 7 role. Had an amazing attacking partnership with Kenyan legend Alan Wanga, whom he provided for at least 14 assists. It was not until 2010, under coach Sadikia Otieno, that Collins Okoth made his national team debut in the Nile Basin against Sudan. Game understanding, and the genius behind it. It was always going to be fun picking Collins Okoth's mind on how he was able to master being a top midfielder. First was his admission that he thrived in a 4-3-3 formation that had been the mainstay at MYSA. Okoth also admits that he was blessed to play with some of the best midfielders of his generation both at club and national team. He partnered Anthony Akumu in the Nile Basin in 2010, played alongside Victor Wanyama and Johanna Omolo. He talks fondly of Victor Wanyama, remembering their time together at the Baba Dogo grounds where they first met and developed a deep game understanding and partnership. Despite being nicknamed Gattuso, after the feisty and effective AC Milan and Italy international. Okoth admits that his game was fashioned around watching Dutchman Edgar Davids and Kenyan McDonald Mariga play. Both, effective central midfielders who were dominant at possession and quite tough to beat. A camp with the national team in Mumias where Mariga was present proved pivotal. Here, he was taught by a master of the European leagues who had been coached by the likes of Jose Mourinho and been teammates with Esteban Cambiasso, Dejan Stankovic, Thiago Motta and Wesley Sneijder on the importance of minimizing touches on the ball as a midfielder. That, as one, he had to know where the ball was to go before receiving it. And if he did not receive it, his duty was to direct the player on the ball where he would make his pass. Scanning of the pitch was another basic fundamental learned, and which he admits that he rarely sees the current crop of Kenyan midfielders do effectively. Mariga would emphasize and guide him on the importance of dominating space as a player. That with the ball, if he saw space, his first duty was to hit the ball there before an opponent covered that space. Interestingly, Okoth emphasizes not just being able to make a pass, but ensuring that those passes are all if not most forward or progressive ones. Then there is the favorite making of angles to receive the ball. When receiving a pass, Okoth mentions that a player should never have his body face the ball in a straight line, rather, it should be opened up at an angle to allow him to have a wider field of view. This way, an opposing player coming to man you can only cover one passing angle, thus leaving you with 2 or more options to either beat them or direct the ball towards. Okoth admits to spending many hours alone after training with the ball and an obstacle, maybe a wall. He would hit the ball against it, then as it returned, he had angled himself and ready to direct it as instinctively guided. He notes that being a step ahead of the opponent when receiving the ball, and clearly knowing where to direct or pass it has been his greatest trick at making football look easy. Terming it as exceptional positional awareness and always being ahead of your opponent. A skill he says Sergio Busquets and Rodri have perfected in the last few years. He cheekily admits that the current crop of midfielders are quite poor in terms of ball and game reading. Often making clumsy passes or many backwards passes that end up inviting pressure from the opponents. Disciplinary record. For all the noise and illusion by many that he is an undisciplined player. Okoth has only received 1 red card by his own admission. It was in a Gor Mahia FC game against Ulinzi Stars. However, he admits that his professional nature of being bold to demand for his rights from club administrators like delayed salaries has always made him get portrayed in bad light. An incident at the national soccer team camp stands out for him. He recalls that alongside other players, they were dismayed when Football Kenya Federation President Nick Mwendwa would turn up to national team practice in camp and start issuing coaching lessons under coach Stanley Okumbi era. When he stood up to disagree with that interference, Mwendwa promised him that he would never feature for the national team again. Makes you wonder the level of professionalism and lack of it in the country. Currently he is unattached, but there could be possibility of him resuming first-team training with a top Kenyan league side after their coach was impressed by his performance in a certain friendly game. The team remains under wraps for now. Okoth has a special mention to the coaches he went through, from Robert Maina, Rishadi Shidu, to Edwin Nandwa, Jacob Muley, Robert Mateno and Sadikia Otieno amongst many others. Credits his game time and understanding of the game to the trust these coaches gave him. He also thanks soccer fans who have always loved him to a man, noting that playing for Gor Mahia and under the demanding fans made him fearless on the pitch.